I'm leaving. I can't continue with this marriage. You are too poor for my liking.
Please don't leave us. I can't take care of the kids alone.
You will have to do it alone. I'm leaving.
She watched him pack his things, feeling like her whole world was falling apart. He said it was over. He was leaving because she didn't have enough money. The kids cried, she cried, but he didn't care. He walked out the door, leaving her and the children behind.
Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel for awesome stories.
It all started when they were young and in love. She remembered when they had nothing, but they were happy. He promised her they would make it through anything. But over time, things changed. He started wanting more. Bigger house, better cars, a fancier lifestyle. She did her best to keep up, working late hours at a low-paying job, but it was never enough. He began complaining. "Why can't you give me more?" he'd ask. "Look at how everyone else is living. I want that too." But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough for him. The bills piled up, the kids needed things she couldn't afford. He didn't see the effort. He didn't see the sleepless nights. All he saw was what they didn't have. One evening, he came home after being away for a few days. He sat her down and told her he was leaving. He said he couldn't stay with someone who didn't have enough money. He didn't love her anymore. And just like that, he walked out the door. She didn't know what to feel at first. Shock, anger, hurt, all of it. The man she loved, the father of her children, was gone. And for what? For money. For the things she couldn't give him. The kids didn't understand. They were too young to grasp why their dad had left. They kept asking where he was, why he wasn't coming home. She tried to hold it together, but it was hard. She didn't want to tell them the truth. She didn't want them to think their dad didn't love them. But the truth was, he didn't love her enough to stay. Not when things were tough. She had to pull herself together. There was no other choice. She had 2 children to take care of, and she couldn't afford to fall apart. The days were long and the nights were even longer. She worked hard at her job, but it was barely enough. Every day she felt the weight of everything, trying to make sure the kids had what they needed, putting food on the table and keeping a roof over their heads. But despite everything, she didn't give up. She didn't have the luxury of giving up. Her children needed her. So she kept going. Every day she woke up and kept fighting. It wasn't easy. There were days when she felt like breaking down, but she couldn't. She had to stay strong for them. Her life had changed, but she didn't let it define her. She knew she was capable of more. Slowly, she started looking for new opportunities. She started taking on extra work, anything to make things a little easier. It was hard. She didn't have a lot of time for herself, but she found moments to rest, to recharge, and to keep going. She did it for her kids and for herself. Her ex-husband, on the other hand, had it all. He found someone else, someone who fit into his world of wealth and status. She heard about it through mutual friends. He moved on quickly, living the life he always wanted, but there was something missing. As time went by, it became clear to him that something wasn't right. His new life wasn't as perfect as he'd imagined. He started to feel a void. The things he had weren't bringing him the happiness he expected. Money, cars, and a big house didn't fill the emptiness inside him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a huge mistake. He had left her. He had left his children. All for what? For something that didn't even make him happy. Years went by and his regret grew. He began to look back at his life, especially at her, at the woman who had always been there for him, even when things were tough. He remembered her kindness, her strength, her love. But it was too late. She had moved on. She had found a way to live without him, and as much as he hated to admit it, he realized that he had made a terrible decision. As the years passed, she focused on what was important, her children. They were growing up fast, and every day she saw how strong and resilient they were becoming. Despite the hardship, she tried to give them as much love as she could. She couldn't buy them everything they wanted, but she made sure they felt cared for. And, most importantly, They understood the value of hard work and staying true to themselves. She enrolled in night classes to improve her skills and opened a small online store to sell homemade goods. It wasn't much at first, but with time it started to grow. Slowly but surely, she was able to save enough money to make things a little easier for the family. It wasn't the wealth her ex-husband had sought, but it was enough. Enough to keep her family safe, to keep them happy, enough to make her feel proud of the life she had created. Her ex-husband's life, however, was far from perfect. Though he had a new partner and a shiny new life, he couldn't escape the feeling of regret that haunted him. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw the man who had abandoned his family for money. He saw the man who had left the woman who loved him, the woman who had given him everything, just to chase a dream that turned out to be empty. Years went by, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried to reach out a few times, but she had moved on. She was no longer the person who needed him. She had built a life without him. She didn't need him to survive anymore, and that stung. He watched from afar as she grew stronger. She didn't need his support. She didn't need his money. She had created a life for herself, and her children were thriving. His heart ached as he saw how well they were doing without him. He had missed so much. Birthdays, school plays, family holidays. He had thrown away a chance to be part of something beautiful for the sake of his own selfish desires. One day he decided he couldn't live with the regret anymore. He had to see her. He had to apologize, even if it didn't change anything. He wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe that she'd take him back, or maybe that she'd at least forgive him. But he knew it was a long shot. Still, he couldn't go on living with the guilt eating at him. He had to try. He reached out to a mutual friend and asked if they could set up a meeting. The friend hesitated, but after some convincing agreed to pass along the message. He wasn't sure what to expect when he finally stood in front of her again. It had been so many years since they had last spoken. When he saw her, he barely recognized the woman who stood in front of him. She was stronger, more confident, and wore a look of contentment he had never seen before. She looked at him without any sign of bitterness, but the coolness in her eyes made it clear that she had moved on. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady but not welcoming. I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice shaky. "For everything. I should have never left you. I should have never walked out on our family. I was selfish and I'm sorry." His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt a wave of emotion that he hadn't expected. She stood still for a moment, taking in his words. She wasn't sure how to feel. She had spent so many years healing from the pain he caused, and now here he was, asking for forgiveness. But the thing was, she had already forgiven him, not for his sake, but for hers. Holding on to anger and resentment only kept her tied to a past she had no control over. She had let go. "You were right about one thing," she said slowly. "You were selfish. But you weren't the only one who was selfish. I thought I was doing everything for you, trying to make you happy, but I lost myself in the process. It took me a long time to realize that I didn't need you to be whole. I never needed your money, I just needed love. And I gave that to myself and to my kids. And I learned something important in all those years. I can do it alone." His face fell, the regret in his eyes clearer than ever. "I wish I had seen that. I wish I had understood what you were really offering me. I was too caught up in the wrong things, and now I know it's too late." She nodded, her expression softening, but her voice remained firm. "It's never too late to change, but it is too late for us. I've moved on. I'm happy with the life I've built. I don't need you anymore, and neither do the kids." He stood there, silent for a long time, processing her words. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was strong and independent, and that made him feel both proud of her and deeply ashamed of himself. He had thought leaving her would make his life better, but all it had done was create a hole in his own heart that nothing could fill. "I don't expect you to forgive me right now," he said quietly, "but I just needed you to know how sorry I am. I wish I could change the past." She looked at him with a mix of sympathy and indifference. "I've forgiven you a long time ago. I had to, or I wouldn't be where I am now. But you can't go back. You can't change the past. All you can do is move forward, like I did. For your sake, I hope you find peace with it." With that, she turned and began to walk away, leaving him standing there facing the consequences of his actions. He watched her walk, seeing how far she had come and how much he had lost. He didn't know if he would ever find peace with the mistakes he had made, but he knew one thing for sure. He had made a terrible mistake, and now all he could do was live with it. As the days passed, he couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. The regret gnawed at him every day. He thought about the life he had left behind, about his children growing up without him, and about the woman he had once promised to love forever. He tried to keep busy with work and his new life, but it all felt hollow. The things that had once seemed so important, money, status, material things, now felt meaningless. He reached out to his children, hoping they would want to talk to him, but they were distant. They didn't seem angry, but they weren't eager to welcome him back either. They had grown up without him, and they had learned to live without their father. The bond they once shared was strained, and it hurt him to see how little he meant to them now. One afternoon he visited his old house. It was a place filled with memories, both good and bad. He stood at the gate, staring at the house that once was filled with laughter, love, and the noise of children playing. It was quiet now. He could see the family that lived there now, through the windows. Kids running around, a mother cooking dinner. It wasn't his family anymore. It had never been his family. He took a deep breath and turned away. There was no going back. He had burned those bridges, and now he had to face the reality of what he had done. The emptiness inside him grew deeper, and he realized that he had lost more than just a family. He had lost the chance to be part of something meaningful. His ex-wife's life, on the other hand, continued to flourish. She had found a balance between work, her children, and her own happiness. She wasn't rich, but she was content. She had built a life that made her proud. The small business she had started grew steadily, and she found a sense of peace that he could never understand. It wasn't easy for her either. Raising children alone, working long hours, and trying to make ends meet. It was exhausting. But she had found strength in herself that she hadn't known existed. She had learned to rely on her own abilities, to trust that she could do this on her own. And she did it, day after day. But sometimes, when the house was quiet at night, she would think about the past, the man she once loved, the life they had shared. It was hard to let go of that, but she knew it was for the best. She had to move on for her own peace of mind. She had learned that love wasn't about wealth or status. It was about trust, respect, and being there for each other. And he hadn't been there when she needed him most. As the years continued to roll by, his regret never seemed to fade. He tried to fill the void with other relationships, but none of them came close to the connection he had once shared with his ex-wife. His new partner had money, a lifestyle he always dreamed of, but there was still something missing. There was no warmth, no deep connection, just the surface of what he had always wanted. He could no longer pretend that he had made the right choice. The coldness of his new life only made him yearn for what he had lost. He often thought about the way she had supported him, the way she had stood by him when he didn't deserve it. He had taken her for granted, thinking that she would always be there, always putting up with him, no matter what. But when the money wasn't enough, and when he needed her the most, she had walked away. Not out of anger, but because she had finally realized that her worth was not tied to him. It was a truth he could no longer deny. His mind kept going back to the time when their family was whole. He thought about the small moments, family dinners, quiet nights at home, helping the kids with their homework. All of those moments were gone, and he had nothing to show for it. He had traded it all for a lifestyle that left him feeling empty. Then came the phone call. It was from his eldest child. She had grown into a young woman, and the distance between them had remained. But this call was different. "Dad," she said, her voice unsure but steady. "We've been thinking about you. Mum says you've been reaching out more lately." His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to want anything to do with him. I want to see you," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to try. For you, for all of you." There was a pause on the other end. His daughter was quiet for a moment before she finally spoke again. "We don't hate you, Dad. We just don't know how to pick up where we left off. But I think we can start with talking." Tears welled in his eyes. He couldn't believe it. After all the years of neglect, of walking away, his daughter was willing to give him a chance. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step forward, a chance to try and rebuild a relationship that he had nearly destroyed. He agreed to meet them. The following week, they arranged a meeting at a park. His daughter, now a young woman, was there with her younger sibling. When he saw them, it was like seeing a reflection of his past, a reflection of all the years he had missed. They were so much older now. His heart ached as he realized just how much time he had wasted. His daughter gave him a tentative smile. "It's been a long time," she said, "but we're not the same as we were. We've changed." "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The meeting was awkward at first. He didn't know how to talk to them, how to make up for the years he had lost, but over time they started to talk. Slowly, cautiously, they shared bits of their lives. His children told him about their accomplishments, their challenges, and the ways they had learned to live without him. He listened, feeling both proud and devastated. Proud of the people they had become, devastated by the years he had wasted. It wasn't a quick fix, and it wasn't an instant reconciliation. The wounds were deep, and the trust would take time to rebuild, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was a way to be a part of their lives again. Maybe he could make amends. As the days passed, he continued to reach out more, trying to be a better father. It wasn't easy, he wasn't perfect, but he tried, and that was all he could do. His ex-wife remained a constant in his mind, but she didn't come back into his life. She had her own journey now, her own peace. He respected that. He understood that he couldn't undo the past, but he was determined to make sure that the future with his children would be different. His ex-wife, on her end, continued to live her life, focusing on her family, her business, and her own happiness. She had found a new rhythm. She had made a life for herself without needing anyone to define her worth. She had grown into someone who didn't rely on anyone for happiness, and she was at peace with that. She knew that forgiveness didn't mean going back. It didn't mean forgetting the past, but it did mean that she had healed enough to let go of the hurt. She had let go of him, but in doing so, she had found herself. As the years went on, both of them moved forward. He learned to cherish the time he had with his children, even though it would never be the same, and she continued to live her life, thriving and teaching her children the lessons of resilience, strength, and independence. Neither of them could change what had happened, but both of them had learned to find peace with it. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer held them back. They had both found a way to move forward, separately, but with a sense of understanding that only time could bring. As the years continued to pass, his life slowly began to take shape, but it was never the same. Every time he saw his children, he was reminded of the years he had lost and the opportunities he'd wasted. The regret that once consumed him started to fade, but it still lingered. The journey of reconnecting with his children wasn't quick or easy, but at least now there was progress. He saw them grow into young adults, strong, intelligent, and independent. His son was now a teenager, and his daughter was about to graduate from college. It was hard for him to understand how much they had changed, how much they had grown without him. There were moments when he felt like an outsider in his own family, but he never gave up. He kept showing up, even when it felt like they didn't need him. One day, his daughter called him with some exciting news. She had graduated, and she wanted him to be there for the ceremony. It wasn't a grand gesture. No promises of reconciliation, no hope that everything would go back to how it used to be. It was just an invitation to be part of her life in a small way. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew he couldn't turn it down. He arrived at the ceremony, feeling nervous but hopeful. When his daughter saw him, she smiled. A real smile, not the guarded one she used to give him. She hugged him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they were starting to heal. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her eyes filled with sincerity. I didn't think you would, but I'm glad you did. He smiled back, unsure of what to say. He wasn't good with words, especially now, but he knew he had to say something. I'm proud of you. You've worked so hard, and I'm proud of the woman you've become. She nodded, then glanced at her brother, who was standing nearby. He came over, and though he didn't hug his father, he extended his hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. A sign that things could be different, a sign that the years of absence and hurt were starting to melt away. The ceremony itself was beautiful. It wasn't the grandest celebration, but it was enough. It was a moment where they were able to share in a small victory together. The rest of the evening was quiet, but filled with a sense of calm. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he had a place in their lives again. As time went on, he kept working to be a better father. He knew there were still many things he couldn't fix, but he was determined to be there for his children now. Slowly, he regained their trust. They weren't the same as they had been when they were little, but they were growing into adults who understood that life wasn't always easy and people made mistakes. They didn't forgive him overnight, but they saw that he was trying. And as for his ex-wife, she remained in his thoughts. He still wished things had been different, but he understood now that it wasn't just about him. She had chosen to move forward, not out of anger, but out of strength. She had found peace with her life, and although he would always regret his actions, he knew he couldn't expect anything from her. She had done what was best for herself, and he respected that. Years passed, and eventually his children became adults, starting families of their own. They had their own lives, their own paths to follow, and though he wasn't always a constant presence, he was there when they needed him. He wasn't the father he had hoped to be, but he was learning to be the father they deserved. He never forgot the lesson he had learned, that money, status, and all the material things he had chased were empty without the love and support of the people who mattered most. He had abandoned that once, and now he was slowly working to rebuild it. His life had changed, and although it wasn't perfect, it was his. He had come a long way from the man who had walked away from his family in search of something that was never going to satisfy him. He had learned to find meaning in the simple things, the love of his children, the quiet moments of reflection, the chance to be a better person. One evening, after years of working hard and rebuilding his relationship with his kids, he sat alone in his apartment. He wasn't wealthy, but he wasn't struggling anymore either. He had a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long, and in that moment he realized that it wasn't too late for him after all. The road was long, but he had made it through. As time passed, his relationship with his children continued to grow, but so did the realization that he had missed out on so much. One day, after a family dinner at his daughter's house, where his son and even his ex-wife had joined him, he sat quietly, watching the laughter and warmth that filled the room. The family was together, and it felt right. He had been there for the special moments, but it could never undo the time he had lost. Later that evening, as he stood outside in the cool breeze, his ex-wife came out to join him. She was calm, no longer the woman he had left behind. She was someone who had grown into herself, someone who had found peace. "You've come a long way," she said quietly, standing next to him. "We've all come a long way." He nodded, unable to find the words to express everything he felt. "I never thought I would get here, but I'm glad I did. I wish I could have been there for everything. I regret so much, but I don't want to live in that regret anymore." She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the peace she had worked so hard to find. Regret won't change the past, but it can teach us how to live better in the present. The weight of her words hung in the air. For the first time, he understood what she meant. Regret wasn't something to carry forever. It was something to learn from and then move forward. He had learnt that lesson the hard way, but he was grateful for the chance to change. The night ended, and as he drove home, he felt a quiet peace settle in his heart. He knew that the future was uncertain and that he couldn't undo the past. But he had made a decision to live differently, to be a better man. Not just for his children, but for himself. The lesson was simple yet profound. It's never too late to change. No matter how far we fall, no matter how many mistakes we make, we can always choose to do better. Regret doesn't have to control us. It can be a guide to lead us toward the life we were meant to live. The past may shape who we are, but it doesn't have to define us. And with that, he drove into the night, the road ahead uncertain, but full of possibility. Lesson to learn. The story teaches that while regret is a heavy burden, it is also an opportunity for growth. The choices we make define our present, but they do not have to dictate our future. It's never too late to make amends, to change and to create a better life, one step at a time.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more.